I've had a couple students kind of comment on how blending was hard and they were struggling with different aspects of it. And so we're using Photoshop and we're just going to blend a couple different ways. First way we're going to blend is the old-fashioned way of taking basically the brush itself, and then with that brush we are going to color pick one side and we are going to start mixing on the other side. Now, to make an easier blend, I always find that having a brush tip shape with a little bit of space in there, in this case I'm just using the chalk brush, adding a little bit of angle jitter to it, and then I'm adding transfer to it, all based on pen pressure. And so what that allows me to do is gives me a little bit of ability to go back and forth. So I'm going to select one color, and I've got the layer locked here so I don't go outside the square. But other than that, I'm just going to kind of build up into this, and I'm just going to build a little bit of orange into that orange, and then over on this side I'm going to kind of build a little bit of this. And so just going back and forth, you can easily see that you can get a good kind of blend back and forth. And so just a matter of kind of choosing your color and moving repeatedly. To blend that. Now it's basically as matter as how much you want to blend, how much grain you want, that type of thing. Another way to blend things is ultimately taking the blend tool, which is basically the smudge tool here. And the smudge tool I don't recommend, and the reason I don't recommend is because the smudge tool just has a lot of like processing power. So basically when you move it back and forth, you're going to get a little bit of a blend, but again, you know, you have to work at it. It's not the greatest to get a nice gradient. I generally tend to move it back and forth at more of a diagonal angle, and then just keep building out and building out. Okay, not the greatest. Processing wise, it generally tends to slow down the system, and it just doesn't necessarily feel like a good way to blend things. The mixer brush then allows me to go in and basically choose how much paint and how much flow you have, and so from there you can kind of push back and forth. The mixer brush is really has a really nice blend to it. It's a really simple way to do things. You can get a lot less texture, if that makes sense, than versus this here. The other way to do this is to actually paint that color. So we can go into the brush setting. We are going to choose our bright color here, and we can go then and choose a soft round here, and we're going to make sure the hardness is there, and then we're just going to kind of build up and apply less and less and less pressure as it goes there. And that's another way to kind of directly paint using the brush strokes. The other way you can always paint, sometimes it's just quick and easy, is ultimately selecting the area you want and applying a gradient of that color. So simply applying a gradient over, I can simply kind of get that mix already nice, even, quickly done, and pretty easy to kind of accomplish. So that gives you that aspect. Another way to blend things together is to kind of go with the mix of the two. So here we're going to select back and forth with this. If I grab this color here and I add that color in there, if we go back and forth. So basically we're going to pick a middle tone color. So in this case, I'm going to pick this light green, and I'm going to just kind of blend that light green in there and kind of add that in there. So you can paint those blends in there. That's generally, if you understand the way color blends, that's an easy way to do things. But those are just a couple ways to kind of blend things together. So the big issue that they brought up was that they wanted their colors to blend like paint. And so the problem is that when you're blending two colors like paint, you generally have a transition between the two colors. So for example, if I go in and let me just grab a new layer here. So for example, I've got my color wheel. I'm going to have my yellow up on top. I'm going to have my purple or violet, red, and orange, green, and blue. So when you're mixing, in this case we're using the red and we're mixing it to kind of a teal blue, we're going to go across. So with that idea in mind, that anything within kind of this circular area here of going across is going to start transitioning to some form of gray. And so with that idea in mind, if I go from here to here, it's going to give me that mid-toned kind of transition. And so you have to understand how that transition works. If I go from here to here, I'm changing the hue structure of that idea. I'm not actually blending the colors together. I'm mixing to create a new color. And so with that idea in mind, we can, let's go here, and actually let's just go back here. And so with that idea in mind, then understanding how you're mixing colors is kind of key to that point. For example, the structure of, and I'm just going to color pick this, so that's green here, and this orange here is going to mix together in two separate layers. So I'm just going to grab that, just to get that light in there. And so with that idea, then I'm mixing two colors in together. And I want to kind of reinforce that color spectrum in there to kind of blend those two colors together. However, if I take the same colors, so if I grab red and then I grab blue, I'm just going to make these next to each other, and I grab this red and I start mixing together, you can already see, because I'm not mixing that color together, I'm gaining more of a purple feel. So you can see that purple transition. So one of the examples that the student gave me was they gave me a color blend idea here, and they said I'm struggling with my issues. And so the first issue that they're having is, one, they're not understanding value in transition. So for example, if I go here and add a black and white filter, you can see that this one's fine, this one's going from light to dark, but this one is kind of all over the place. So with that in mind, you have to understand how you're transitioning color. So for example, from this one, you're transitioning from a dark orange to a purple, pink, to a much more purple, and then all the way to a light blue. So the problem is, one, there's too much transition in here, and two, there is the wrong kind of gradient. So like I won't get a feeling of what that color is. So for example, if I'm going to paint a sphere, just grab a sphere. So if I'm going to paint a sphere with that color transition, I'm going to kind of pick this, right? And then what I'm going to do is I have that mid-tone here, like so. And you can see the transition of color sourcing here. So you can see that transition of that color is kind of blending together. But as soon as I start adding in this color here, it starts getting a harder kind of feeling. One, because I'm not getting dark enough in the shadows, and two, there's really no depth and form in there. It really boils down to value. I can do this if I take this value structure and start bringing it down a little bit more, and now I'm getting more of a value structure. So you can see here, with that idea in mind, you can get a much better value structure going on if you darken the transition. Okay, and again, we look at it from a black and white, and now we see the gray tones basically value work together. Same thing kind of goes over here. The same value structure, we're going dark to like almost, this is our darker, this is the middle tone, this is the next tone, and then this is the lightest. And so the problem with that is basically the way we're doing this particular object. So again, doing this idea over here, you have to understand what you're doing from that standpoint. So again, thinking of it from that value standpoint, if we use this as the darkest here, and then this is the second darkest here, and then even this as a tertiary darkness here, and I'm just kind of blending some of that in there. And then this almost is better kind of, I'm going to just stick with 3 tones because those other tones don't match the same value structure or same chroma. And then adding this in as a highlight. Makes a huge difference. So you're better off picking less colors to blend to start with, and to kind of build up that idea. So with this being warm gives me a better idea that whatever this surface is on is warm itself. And again, I can still change that value structure and go darker and kind of blend that together a little bit more to get a little bit darker kind of form feeling. Okay, that's the structure that you have to understand, is you have to understand what colors you're using and why you're using them. So this blue highlight here would represent a cool light here. Same thing over here, this blue highlight would represent a much lighter source, cooler light. And so again, blending doesn't necessarily mean picking all the colors and putting them in. Stick with a couple of colors and going from the light to dark transition, or from that blending transition, and that's going to give you a better look and feel on your color blending. All right, I hope that helps. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, and I hope to see you later.